The smell hit me first. Panic has a smell, you know. It's sharp, metallic, like when you bite your tongue hard enough to taste copper. I stood in the parking lot of Miller's Grocery on Elm Street in Springfield, Missouri, watching people tear into each other like animals. A woman in her 40s, maybe 50, had a box of crackers clutched against her chest. A younger man, college age, ripped it from her hands. She screamed. He didn't look back. 6 hours. That's all it took. 6 hours from the first news alert to complete chaos. The shelves inside were stripped clean, and I mean clean. Not a can of beans, not a roll of toilet paper, not even the expired stuff they usually kept in the back corner. People were walking out with their arms full of things they'd never eat in their normal lives. I saw a man carrying 12 jars of pickled beets. Another woman had nothing but cat food, and I knew for a fact she didn't own a cat. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I'd already done my shopping 3 months ago. My truck sat at the far end of the lot away from the madness. I leaned against the tailgate, my arms crossed, and I watched. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't feeling superior. I felt sick, because I'd told them. I'd stood in front of 47 people in the community center and told them this was coming, and they laughed at me. Gerald Patterson was the worst. President of the Brookside Neighborhood Association, big smile, bigger opinions. He stood up right in the middle of my presentation, pointed at me like I was a kid in detention and said, "Steve, you're scaring people for no reason. This is America. Our supply chain is the strongest in the world. You're spreading panic, and frankly, it's irresponsible." The room erupted in applause. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that I felt my face burn, enough that my hands started shaking. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing that presentation. Charts, data, news reports from other states where shortages had already started. I showed them the patterns, the warnings, the writing on the wall. And Gerald dismissed it all with a wave of his hand and a politician's grin. I remember the exact words he used when he walked past me afterward. He clapped me on the shoulder, leaned in close and whispered, "Steve, buddy, you gotta stop watching those doom and gloom YouTube channels. You're gonna give yourself a heart attack." I didn't respond. I just packed up my charts and went home. That night I added another 50 pounds of rice to my storage. Now, standing in that parking lot, watching a man throw a punch over the last bag of flour, I wondered if Gerald remembered that night. I wondered if he was in that store right now fighting for scraps. I wondered if his grandkids were hungry. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. The temperature had dropped to maybe 55 degrees, and the wind carried the smell of diesel fuel from the highway nearby. Someone's car alarm was going off. No one cared. The sound just blended into the shouting, the crying, the dull roar of a society that had forgotten how fragile it really was. I got in my truck and drove home. My house is at the end of Maple Drive, a quiet street with old trees and older people. Most of my neighbors are retired like me. I worked 32 years as a mechanical engineer for Boeing before I called it quits. My wife Linda passed 6 years ago. Heart failure. Since then, it's just been me and this house and the lessons I learned from my father, who lived through the Depression. "Steve," he used to say, "hope for the best but prepare for the worst. And when the worst comes, you help who you can." I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment. The porch light was on. I'd installed motion sensors last year. The house looked normal, peaceful even, but I knew what was inside. Rows of shelves in the basement, stocked with rice, beans, canned vegetables, powdered milk, flour, sugar, salt. I had water filtration systems, medical supplies, batteries, candles, propane tanks. I had everything I needed to survive for 6 months, maybe longer if I rationed. And I had it because I listened. I paid attention. I didn't ignore the signs. The first sign came 4 months ago. A buddy of mine, Carl, works logistics for a national distributor. We were having coffee at the diner on 4th Street, and he mentioned something in passing. "Steve," he said, stirring his coffee slowly, "I'm seeing delays I've never seen before. Trucks sitting idle, warehouses running low, something's off." I asked him what he thought was causing it. He shrugged. "Could be a dozen things. Fuel costs, labor shortages, regulations, maybe all of it. But if I were you, I'd stock up on the basics, just in case." That was enough for me. I didn't need a government announcement or a news headline. I trusted Carl, so I started buying. A little here, a little there. Nothing that would draw attention. I rotated my stock, kept everything organized, labeled, dated. I treated it like a second job. And then I made the mistake of trying to warn my neighbors. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought, these are good people. They deserve to know. So I requested time at the neighborhood association meeting. Gerald approved it, probably thinking I was going to talk about something harmless, like street repairs or the community barbecue. Instead, I showed up with a slideshow. I can still see their faces. Confusion at first, then discomfort, then annoyance. I talked for 12 minutes before Gerald cut me off. 12 minutes of facts, data, logic. And it didn't matter. Because people don't want to believe the world can fall apart. It's easier to believe I'm crazy. Margaret Cho, who lives 2 houses down, raised her hand during the Q&A. "Steve," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "don't you think you're being a little extreme? I mean, we live in one of the most stable countries on earth." I wanted to say, "Margaret, stable doesn't mean invincible." But I didn't. I just nodded and said, "I hope you're right." She wasn't. The crisis started small. News reports about shortages in Seattle, then Portland, then Denver. People weren't paying attention. It was always somewhere else, someone else's problem, until it wasn't. The day it hit Springfield, I was in my garage organizing tools. My police scanner was on in the background. I like to keep tabs on what's happening in town. Around noon, the chatter picked up. Calls about disturbances at grocery stores. Then more calls. Then the tone changed. Officers requesting backup. Reports of fights, theft, panic. I walked to the front of my house and looked down the street. It was quiet, too quiet. No kids playing, no cars passing by, just an eerie stillness, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. By evening, the silence was replaced by something worse. Doors slamming, engines revving, people shouting. I watched from my window as families piled into cars and sped off, probably heading to stores in neighboring towns. They'd find the same thing I saw at Miller's. Nothing. I made myself dinner that night, chicken and rice, simple and filling. I ate slowly, sitting at my kitchen table, listening to the chaos outside. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I wasn't scared, I was ready. If you've ever been in a situation like mine, or if you know someone who has, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. It helps us bring real stories to more people who need to hear them. Now back to the growing tension. Day 2. That's when it got real for most people. The initial panic had passed, replaced by cold, hard reality. There was no food, the stores weren't restocking, delivery trucks weren't coming, and the government's reassurances on the news felt hollow, distant, meaningless. I spent the morning reinforcing my doors, not because I expected trouble, but because preparation is about expecting everything. I added extra deadbolts, checked my windows, made sure my exterior lights were working. I wasn't paranoid. I was prudent. Around 2 in the afternoon, I heard a knock. It wasn't a polite knock. It was desperate, hard, insistent. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. Gerald Patterson stood on my porch, but this wasn't the Gerald I knew. The confident, smiling, glad-handing president of the neighborhood association was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, his shirt was wrinkled, stained with sweat, and behind him, clutching his legs, were 3 small children, his grandkids. I recognized them from the neighborhood Easter egg hunt last year. The oldest couldn't have been more than 7, the youngest maybe 4, and they were crying. Not loud, theatrical crying. Quiet, exhausted, hungry crying. The kind that breaks your heart because you know it's real. Gerald knocked again, harder. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, and I felt a war inside myself. Part of me, a small, bitter part, wanted to leave him standing there, wanted to let him feel what it's like to be dismissed, ignored, humiliated. He'd laughed at me. He'd made me look like a fool in front of the entire neighborhood. But then I looked at those kids, and I thought about what my father would do. I opened the door. Gerald didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing, like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. His hands were shaking. I could see the tremor in his fingers as he gripped the shoulder of the oldest child, a little girl with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose days ago. "Steve," he finally said, and his voice cracked. My grandkids haven't eaten since yesterday morning. We went to every store within 30 miles. There's nothing. Not even gas stations. I didn't know where else to go." I looked at the children. The little girl was staring at the ground. The middle child, a boy maybe 5 years old, had his thumb in his mouth. The youngest, another girl, had tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. Their clothes were clean enough, but their faces told the story. Hollow eyes, pale skin, the unmistakable look of real hunger. I stepped aside. "Come in." Gerald hesitated, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then he ushered the kids inside, his hand on their backs, protective and gentle. They shuffled into my entryway, and I closed the door behind them. The house was warm. I keep the thermostat at 72 degrees year-round. The kids immediately gravitated toward the heat, their small bodies huddling together near the hallway. "Sit down," I said, pointing to the kitchen table. "All of you." They obeyed without question. Gerald helped the youngest into a chair, lifting her up because she was too small to climb herself. He didn't sit. He just stood there, his hands on the back of a chair, knuckles white from gripping too hard. I went to the pantry, not the basement storage, just the everyday pantry in the kitchen, and pulled out a loaf of bread, peanut butter, strawberry jam, and a gallon of milk. Simple food. Kid food. I made 3 sandwiches, cut them into triangles the way my wife used to do for the neighborhood kids when they'd come over, and poured 3 small glasses of milk. I set the plates in front of the children. They didn't move. They looked at Gerald, waiting for permission. He nodded, his eyes glistening, and they attacked the food like they'd never seen a sandwich before. The oldest girl ate so fast, she started choking. I handed her the milk. "Slow down, sweetheart, it's okay. There's more if you need it." She nodded, swallowed, and forced herself to chew slower. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that this might be the last meal, the fear that someone might take it away. Gerald finally sat down. He put his head in his hands, and his shoulders started shaking. He was crying, quietly, so the kids wouldn't hear. But I heard. I heard every ragged breath, every suppressed sob. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. I didn't say anything. I just let him cry, because sometimes that's all a man needs. Permission to fall apart. After a few minutes, he looked up. His face was red, his eyes swollen. "You tried to warn us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You stood in front of everyone and told us this would happen, and I laughed at you. I made you look like a fool." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, you did. I'm sorry, Steve. God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were being paranoid. I thought you were one of those people who sees conspiracy in everything. I didn't..." He trailed off, looking at his grandkids. "I didn't think it could actually happen." "Most people don't," I said. "That's the problem. We've gotten so used to abundance that we forgot how quickly it can disappear. We forgot that the world doesn't owe us anything, that safety is an illusion we maintain through preparation, not hope." Gerald wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What do I do now? I don't have anything. My daughter, she's their mom. She's stuck in Chicago. Flights are grounded. She can't get back. It's just me and the kids, and I don't know how to keep them alive." The youngest girl had finished her sandwich. She was looking at me with big brown eyes, her hands folded in her lap. "Mister," she said softly, "do you have more food?" I smiled at her. "I do, sweetheart, and you can have as much as you need." I went to the basement. My storage area is organized by category: grains, proteins, vegetables, fruits, seasonings, medical supplies, water. Everything labeled, everything rotated by expiration date. I grabbed a box and filled it with essentials: rice, beans, canned soup, pasta, tomato sauce, oatmeal, powdered milk, peanut butter, crackers. Enough to feed Gerald and the kids for a week, maybe 10 days if they were careful. When I came back upstairs, Gerald was helping the kids wash their hands in the kitchen sink. They were giggling now, splashing water on each other. The transformation was remarkable. 10 minutes ago they were ghosts, now they were kids again. I set the box on the counter. Gerald turned and saw it. His face crumpled. "Steve, I don't have money to pay you back. I don't have anything." "I'm not asking for money," I said. "I'm asking you to do something more important. I'm asking you to help me help this neighborhood. Because, Gerald, if your grandkids are hungry, there are other kids out there who are hungry too. And we can't fix the whole country, but we can fix this street. We can fix Maple Drive." He stared at me, processing. Then he nodded. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next 3 days, Gerald and I became an unlikely team. We went door to door, talking to every family on our street. We found out who had food and who didn't, who had skills and who needed help. We created a system, a community food bank using my basement as the hub. I didn't give everything away, that would have been stupid, but I gave enough to keep people from starving, enough to keep kids from crying themselves to sleep at night, and in return people contributed what they could. Mrs. Chen from the corner house was a retired nurse. She set up a medical station in her garage. Tom Bradford, the guy who used to ignore me at neighborhood meetings, turned out to be a master gardener. He started teaching people how to grow vegetables in their backyards, using seeds I'd stored for this exact purpose. Margaret Cho, the woman who'd questioned me at the meeting, came to my door on day 4. She didn't have food to contribute, but she had something else: organization skills. She'd been an executive assistant for 30 years. She created spreadsheets, tracking who had what, who needed what when supplies were running low. She turned chaos into order. And Gerald became my second in command. He went from dismissing me to defending me. When people complained that I was hoarding or being unfair, Gerald shut them down. "Steve saved my grandkids' lives," he'd say, his voice firm and unyielding. "He tried to save all of us, and we didn't listen. So now we're going to listen." On day 7, the neighborhood association held an emergency meeting. This time it wasn't in the community center. It was in my backyard. 43 people showed up. Some I recognized, some I'd never seen before. They sat in lawn chairs, on the grass, on the porch steps, and they listened. Gerald stood at the front. He'd asked me if he could speak first. I agreed. "I owe everyone here an apology," he began, his voice steady but humble. 3 weeks ago, Steve Patterson stood in front of us and warned us that this crisis was coming. He showed us data, evidence, facts, and I dismissed him. I called him paranoid. I made him feel small. And because of that, because I was too arrogant to listen, my grandchildren almost starved. The crowd was silent. You could hear the wind rustling through the oak trees, the distant hum of a generator someone had running. "Steve didn't have to help me," Gerald continued. "He had every right to turn me away, but he didn't. He opened his door, he fed my grandkids, and then he helped me feed this neighborhood. Steve Patterson is the reason some of you are still alive right now. And I think it's time we stop treating preparation like it's crazy and start treating it like it's necessary." He turned to me. "Steve, this community owes you everything. And I'm proposing right here, right now, that we establish a permanent emergency food bank and that we name you as the official advisor. Will you accept?" Every eye turned to me. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of their expectations, their hope, their desperation. I looked at Gerald, at his grandkids sitting on a blanket nearby, at Margaret with her clipboard, at Tom with dirt still under his fingernails from planting seeds. "I'll accept," I said. "On one condition. This can't be about one person. It has to be about all of us. We build this together, we maintain it together. And when the next crisis comes, because there will be a next crisis, we face it together." The crowd erupted in applause, not polite, obligatory applause, real, genuine, grateful applause. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since Linda died. I felt like I mattered. Over the following weeks, things slowly stabilized. Supply trucks started moving again, though not at full capacity. Stores reopened, though shelves were still spotty. The government finally got its act together and deployed emergency rations to affected areas. But by then, our neighborhood didn't need them as much as others, because we'd already learned to take care of ourselves. We established rules. Every household would contribute 5% of their monthly food purchases to the community bank. We rotated stock, just like I'd been doing for years. We held monthly preparedness workshops, everything from canning vegetables to purifying water to basic first aid. Tom's garden project expanded to 12 homes. We created a seed exchange. Mrs. Chen trained 6 people in emergency medical response, and Gerald became the fiercest advocate for preparation I'd ever seen. He spoke at city council meetings, convincing them to create a municipal emergency fund. He wrote op-eds for the local paper. He became, in his own words, the thing I used to mock. One evening, about 6 weeks after that first desperate knock on my door, Gerald and I were sitting on my porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. His grandkids were playing in my yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Their mother had finally made it back from Chicago. She'd hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack, whispering thank you over and over, until the words lost meaning and became pure emotion. "Steve," Gerald said, sipping the iced tea I'd made, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night at the meeting, about the supply chain, about fragility, about how quickly things can fall apart." "Yeah? You were right, about all of it. But you were right about something else too, something you didn't say out loud." I looked at him. "What's that?" "You were right that the real victory isn't being right, it's being ready. And more than that, it's using what you have to help others. You could have let us all starve. You could have said, 'I told you so,' and locked your door. But you didn't. And that's the difference between a survivalist and a human being." I thought about that for a long moment. The word survivalist had always bothered me. It made it sound selfish, isolated, afraid. But that's not what preparation is about. Not really. My father used to say that a man's worth isn't measured by what he has, but by what he does when he has more than he needs. I had more than I needed, so I shared. It's not complicated. Gerald smiled. "Maybe not, but it's rare." The kids ran up to the porch, breathless and sweaty. "Grandpa," the oldest said, "can we plant tomatoes in our yard like Mr. Bradford showed us?" Gerald looked at me, then back at his granddaughter. "You know what? Yeah, we can. And Mr. Steve here is going to teach us how to do it right." I nodded. "First lesson starts tomorrow. Bring a shovel and a good attitude." She grinned and ran back to her siblings, already planning where the garden would go. That night, after everyone had gone home, I stood in my basement, looking at the shelves that had saved lives. They were less full now, but they'd be restocked. The system worked. The community understood. I thought about Linda. I thought about how she'd always said I worried too much, prepared too much, planned too much. But she'd also said, "Steve, your heart is bigger than your fear. Don't ever forget that." I hadn't forgotten. The true victory isn't having the foresight to prepare. It's having the compassion to share. It's understanding that we don't survive alone. We survive together. And when the world falls apart, the ones who make it through aren't the ones with the biggest stockpiles. They're the ones who remember that being human means taking care of each other, even when, especially when, no one else will. If this story moved you as much as we hoped it would, leave a comment sharing which moment impacted your life the most. Subscribe to this channel to follow stories that touch hearts and transform perspectives. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to understand that in life, prudence and preparation can be the greatest of virtues.